We're now going to take a little break from our Java deep dive and practice what we've learned so far with variables, if statements, arrays, and maps to create our higher or lower game. So it's pretty simple. We need to type in a number to try and guess a random number between 1 and 20 that our phone has generated. So if I start by guessing 10, then it tells me that I need to guess lower. So I'll guess 5, higher than 5, 7, lower than 7, it must be 6. Excellent. And then it generates a new random number and invites the user to play again. So pretty simple. There is of course one big new thing that you don't know how to do yet, and that is to generate a random number. And as before, I'm going to leave that to you to try and figure out. Just a quick bit of Googling should get you the answer as to how you generate a random number between 1 and 20. There are a couple of other little quirks that you might come across as you're building this app. But as always, don't panic. If you can find solutions by Google, then great. If not, then just follow along with the video and I'll show you how to make it. So I hope you have fun with this app. Time to pause the video and give it a shot. Best of luck. All right then, here we go. I hope that went well for you. I'm going to start, of course, by creating a new project within Android Studio. I'm going to call it higher or lower and use all of our default settings. So the empty activity and finish. So we'll start by setting up the user interface, which will be very, very simple. And then we'll write the code. Of course, as I mentioned, the new bit, the bit that we haven't done before, is generating a random number. So let's take a moment while the app is launching. And let's see how we generate a random number in Java. So that's what I would have searched for. You could search for generate random number Android as well. That would probably give you the same thing, but this is quite Java specific. Okay, so that top result looks pretty perfect for us. Here we go. And this looks ideal. So we're creating a random, which we call rand here, which is a new random. And then we're creating an integer n, which is taken from our random. And we use the nextInt method to generate a random number from that. And it looks like this will generate a random number between 1 and 50. So nextInt 50 in itself would generate a random number between 0 and 49. So we have to plus 1 to get a number between 1 and 50. Okay, that makes sense. We'll come back to that and grab that code when we need it. For now though, here's our app. So let's start by setting up our user interface. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with layouts or images here. We're going to focus on the code, but you're welcome to make it look a little prettier if you like. So here we go. I'm going to start by taking this label and I'll use the existing one. So I'll change that text to I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 20. And then we'll bring in another text view underneath that one, which will say, can you guess it? Okay, and I think I'll just add a little bit of a margin around the can you guess it and change the text size slightly so it's a little more obvious. Let's try 15 SP. A little larger, I think. Great. Okay, then we'll bring in a text field, and we're definitely expecting a number here. So let's bring that in, and as usual, I like my text fields to be full width. Great. And then the final element that we need is a button. So I'll call that guess. And there we go. That's my user interface. So I'll just set the ID for the edit text to be guess edit text. Update any XML references. And I'll also add an on-click method for the button, which will just be guess. Okay, right, that's my user interface. I'll run my app in the background and then jump over to mainActivity.java to write our code. Okay, here we go. So we're going to create a method that we used to. So it's a public method. It's not returning anything, so it's void, and it's called guess. It's being called by the button, which is a view. So we'll create a variable called view with a little v of a type view with a big V to represent that button. Okay, so as we've done before, rather than go straight into generating random numbers, I'm going to make sure everything's connected up right, and first find the value of the edit text and display that in a toast. So we'll create an edit text called guess edit text. And we're going to need to convert this to an edit text from find view by ID, and the ID is going to be resources dot IDs dot guess edit text. And then we're going to display that value as a toast. So we'll create a new toast using toast.makeText. MainActivity.this is the context. The thing we want to display is going to be the guess edit text dot get text dot toString. Lovely. When you start to do things several times, it starts to guess what you want. Often it gets it right, which is great. And then we'll leave the length as short, and then we use .show to actually show the thing. And here we go. So let's give it a try. I'll just pop in a number there. Tap guess, and that appears. Excellent. Great. So our app is all connected up and working as we'd like. Time now to introduce our random number generator. So let's copy the code over from here. I'll pop it in after the edit text. So we're creating a new random number. And we want our random number to be between 1 and 20. So I can just change that to 20 and it should give us our random number. However, you might see that we've got a bit of a problem here. The way this code is set up, it's going to generate a new random number every time the user guesses, which is not what we want. It'll be impossible for them to get it unless they're very lucky. So a neat way around that is to generate our random number when the app is launched. And you hopefully remember, although we haven't used it before, the onCreate method is where we can run code that will run when the app is launched. So if we move our random generation code to there, then the random number will be generated when the app is launched rather than when the button is clicked, which is much better. But there is a small problem with the code in its current form, and that is if we try and access this integer up here, that won't work. It doesn't know about that variable up there in the guess method. So to get around that, we can define our integer outside of these two methods. And this is something known as variable scope, that anything defined outside a method will be available within that method, but anything defined inside a method, like that n, will only be available within that method. So if we define, let's call it random number, as an integer there outside the methods, I can now use it here. And so this will now create our random number generator and then a random number, and it will assign that random number between 1 and 20 to the integer random number, which is available anywhere in the main activity class. So I can now refer to random number right there. So well done if you managed to either figure that out or find a different solution to that particular problem. So now we need to test whether their number is higher or lower or equal to the random number. To do that, we're going to need to get the value of their guess and convert it to an integer. Now again, that's something we haven't done before. So let's do a quick Google search, see if we can figure out how to do that. So again, we're in Java, convert string to integer. You may remember we use the parse double function to convert the string to a double before, so we're expecting something fairly similar to that. And it looks like, here we go, we've got integer.parseInt. So exactly the same as how the double function works. So let's see if we can make that work. So let's create an integer, which will be the user's guess as an integer. And then that's going to be guess, edit text. And then we're going to get the text again and convert it to a string. And then we want to apply the method integer.parseInt to that. So integer.parseInt, and then the string we want to convert to an integer is that. Great, so that should give us their guess as an integer. Now let's start some checking as to whether their guess is greater or less than the random number. So we'll start with a if guessInt is greater than random number. So if that's the case, we'll create a toast saying lower, because it means if their guess is bigger than the random number, they need to guess lower. Okay, then we'll look to see if their guess is less than the answer, so the random number. Oops, I could do with an if there as well. If you start seeing that the auto predict is not predicting as you would expect, probably means that you've forgotten something or there's a problem in your earlier code. So if this is the case, we'll then toast higher. And finally, if it's neither greater than or less than, it must be equal to. So let's toast to say that's right. And now we no longer need this test toast either. All right, so let's give it a try. We've got a few changes that we need to make the game perfect, but it should be playable in its current form. So let's give it a try. I'll start with a guess of 10. We need to go lower, so 5, lower, 3, higher, must be 4. Excellent. Okay, so the game works. Of course, one big problem is that once users guessed it once, they're going to want to guess again. But at the moment, it doesn't generate a new random number. It just keeps it at that same random number. So when they get it right, let's generate a new random number, which we can do in just the same way we did before. So we need a new rand. So I'll just copy that over. So rand dot, and then next int 20 plus 1. And let's give the user a message, something like that's right, try again, just to make it clear that they can then guess a new number. So let's try that out. Here we go. So I'll use my cutting in half method again. So starting with 10, 15, 12, we've got it. Okay, and then if we guess 12 again, then it's no longer correct. Get there in the end, 9. Fantastic. So there's only one change that I want to make to this code, and this is to get rid of the 3 quite chunky and very similar lines of code that we've got there. So generally speaking, you want to avoid repeating yourself in code. So if, for example, we wanted to change it from a toast to updating a text field, for example, we'd have to update that 3 times, which isn't great. Not impossible with an app of this scale, but if it was a bigger app, then we'd want to make this more efficient. And we can do that simply by creating a function to do the toasting for us. So for example, we could do public, and again, void, because we're not going to be returning anything, just making a toast. And I'll call it make toast. And this function is going to expect a string, which I'll just call string. And then, when we've got the string, what the function will do is create a toast where the string is the string that was passed to it. Very, very simple. So that means I can now replace this line with the command make toast lower. Similarly, I can replace this line with make toast higher. And this line becomes make toast. That's right. Try again. There we go. So not only is our code more efficient than it was before, we've got far less text than we had. It's also much more easier to update. If I want to change the way that I display messages to users, I only have to update this bit of code once rather than updating each bit of code separately. So just to finally check that that works in the same way that it did before, let's do one more run through. So I'll have a guess of 10 higher. It's looking good. 18 was correct. Try again. And again, we're given a new number. Excellent. So I hope you enjoyed that and you managed to make a fair bit of it yourself. We're now going to dive back into Java itself, and we're going to start by looking at the great power that we can get from working with loops.